Hey guys, it's Dr. May. How are you today? Well, I'm here for another round of Radically Open DBT. Okay, so we're going to do the second part of lesson one. And this is a really important skill that's discussed all throughout Radically Open DBT. And this is called self-inquiry. All right, so we're going to talk all about that today and talk about some key questions we could be asking ourselves. All right, so if you remember from the first part of lesson one, we were talking about moving from being closed to being more open, right? And we talked about the skill flexible mind, definitely. And that was a skill that's supposed to help us move from being closed to being open, right? And the E in DEF, which are the three letters that have the acronym, stands for inquiry, all right? So for all you American listeners, inquiry with an I and inquiry or inquiry with an E means exactly the same thing. So it's basically about asking yourself questions that kind of helps to open you up, okay? So don't let the E throw you if you're from the US. If you're from the UK and so forth, you may not care, but I know some people might be a little confused by that, okay? So anyway, so lesson one, part two, learning from self-inquiry or inquiry. I'm not sure if there's actually a different pronunciation, so forgive me for my ignorance. Oh man, okay. So let's get to it. All right, so what's self-inquiry? So basically, it's about turning toward your distress and trying to crack it open a little bit. So instead of defending yourself and getting hardened around your distress or getting overly defended around some very vulnerable, painful feelings, we're going to try to explore it a little bit, right? And kind of open it up a little more to understand it and bring us some new insights and help us be a little more open to what it's trying to tell us so that we can learn something, okay? And it gives us like more flexibility in how we could respond because we'll have more knowledge about what this distress is about and what my defensive response to that distress, my closed response actually means for me and why I'm doing it, right? So it's a great insight tool. And it also helps us to, you know, kind of have more effective relationships just because we're responding in a more open way, okay? So essentially, it's really just about finding a good question. You don't necessarily have to find the perfect answer to any of the questions you're asking yourself. And sometimes just the act of asking the questions helps to loosen you up, even if you don't even literally think of a response. It's interesting how it works. You'll find it when you try it out yourself. Okay, so it's actually something you have to do and put to practice in a situation just to see for yourself. Okay, so essentially it's not about finding a solution or problem solving or finding an answer or finding a new way to justify what it was to defend yourself. It's about like opening it up so you can learn and grow from a situation, okay? And the main thing is we don't want to turn this into like a rumination session where we're going to like torture ourselves with painful questions and go on and on and on with this process. So the idea is to keep it brief, okay? So 5 minutes or less. And you know, when you find yourself feeling closed, this is something you could try to help open yourself up. So you only really have to do this if you're feeling closed. All right. So it doesn't have to really be done at other times unless you really feel like it. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do is practice this together. Okay. So there's a series of suggested general questions you could ask yourself that's in a handout in the manual. Okay. And I'm going to go through those questions with you. And they suggest that if you find yourself in a situation where you're feeling closed, you could start by looking at these questions. Okay. I mean, obviously, every situation could be is a little unique, and you can come up with your own questions. But these are just some guidelines you could follow, just to kind of give yourself an idea of like the kinds of things you could ask yourself or how to go about this self-inquiry practice. Okay, so just to kind of make this work a little bit better, I want you to try to think of a situation. If it's one right now, that's great, but maybe something recently where you felt a little bit closed around an issue. Okay, so for example, like maybe you had an interaction with somebody and you were feeling a little bit invalidated or criticized by that person, you know, and that kind of makes us feel a little defensive, right? Or maybe someone gave you some kind of disconfirming or negative feedback that kind of made you feel uncomfortable or rubbed you the wrong way or made you a little angry, right? That's another situation where we could clam up. Or maybe someone challenged our beliefs or challenged our expectations about something and it kind of threw us off a little bit. Or we were kind of in a very unusual, novel, or uncertain situation And sometimes uncertainty really feels uncomfortable. So we try to create certainty by becoming more closed, right? So those are just kind of like some general triggers that could trigger us for feeling closed. So maybe there's something specific that you went through recently that kind of comes to mind when you think of these kind of triggers. All right, so you can just kind of file that away as we go forward. All right, so the next series of slides is going to go through some sample questions. All right, so here we go. You ready? All right. Okay, so when we feel closed, sometimes our body literally responds, right? We kind of feel tense, like we're armoring up against this difficult, painful trigger, okay? So if you have a sign of this body tension as a sign of being closed, you could ask yourself some of these questions, right? So is it possible that my bodily tension means I'm not fully open to the feedback, right? Like maybe I'm armoring up against it. If yes, or possibly, then what am I avoiding, right? What's that painful thing that I'm trying to protect myself from? Is the resistance, dislike, and tension I'm feeling helpful, right? Like, is it good to do this, or is it a problem to do this, right? And what is it that I might need to learn from my closed-mindedness? Right? So just get you to think a little bit, right? Okay, so next, another sign you're closed might be that you're, in an interaction with somebody and you find yourself like jumping in, responding really quickly, talking fast, you're feeling physically stressed out, right? Kind of like those guys look in that picture, like they look like they're having a stressful conversation, right? So I'm sure we all find ourselves in that sometimes, right? Kind of just jumping in and we're trying to manage this whole thing. Okay, so am I talking more quickly or immediately responding to the other person's feedback or questions, right? Maybe a little anxiety under there, right? Am I holding my breath or breathing more quickly? Right? Another sign we're stressed out. Has my heart rate changed? If yes or maybe, then what does this mean? And what is driving me to respond so quickly? Is it possible I'm feeling threatened, right? And if so, what am I afraid of? Okay. All right. More food for thought. Okay, next. Sign of being closed, feeling more tense and more defensive. Okay. So do I find myself wanting to automatically explain, defend, or discount the other person's feedback or what's happening, right? So if I could just make it go away, then maybe I don't have to deal with it, right? Like I'm not going to be open to that. I'm just going to defend myself and say, oh, that's stupid, right? Okay. If yes or maybe, then is this a sign I might not be truly open? Okay. Next, we're fear of change. Okay. This change is a vulnerable position to be in, right? If we're getting feedback that something's not right in what I'm doing, and the implication is I might have to change and do something else, or I'm wrong about something, stirs up some anxiety, right? So if I'm afraid of the change and bracing against it, that could be a sign I'm closed, okay? So am I finding it hard to question my point of view or even engage in self-inquiry, right? So is it hard for me to even contemplate that I could be wrong or need to change, right? If yes or maybe, then what might this mean? Am I resisting being open to this feedback because part of me believes that doing so will change an essential part of who I am, right? So if I had to change something that I'm used to doing or something that I believe or some kind of routine that I have, it almost feels like a part of me is going to die off. And it's like, oh, who am I going to be without that, right? Or from different, right? It's a little scary. All right, so what might I be afraid of? Okay. All right, next. Okay, so right or wrong, okay? So sometimes we're so afraid of being wrong that we defend ourselves and try to insist that we're right, okay? So here we go. Here's some questions around that kind of scenario. All right, am I able to truly pause and consider the possibility that I might be wrong and may need to change, okay? Am I saying to myself, I know I'm right, no matter what they say or how things seem, right? Am I just insisting that I'm right no matter what because it's hard for me to even bend from that? Or do I feel like shutting down, quitting, and giving up? Okay. If yes or maybe, then it's possible. Is it possible I'm operating out of fixed or fatalistic mind? Okay. So fixed mind is more like being very rigid. Fatalistic mind is more being like, oh, forget it. I give up. Okay. More about that in a future video. Okay. And what is it that I fear? Okay. So you notice the theme here, like a lot of the questions always go back to what's the fear underneath all these closed behaviors. Okay. Next, easy to feel hurt, hurt, excuse me. So if you're feeling invalidated, you're feeling criticized, you feel like you're getting disconfirming feedback, sometimes we feel hurt, right? So do I feel invalidated, hurt, unappreciated, or misunderstood by the person giving me disconfirming feedback? Okay. Is there a part of me that believes it's important for them to acknowledge or apologize that they don't understand me before I'd be willing to fully consider their position? Right? So how dare you say that to me? You're not understanding, obviously, because you're telling me to change, you're not understanding me. That's what's going on here, or something like that, right? So sometimes we're so busy blaming them that we're like, well, they're wrong for even criticizing me, so they need to apologize. They're the one who's hurting me, right? So how could I listen to them if they're hurting me? I'm just blowing them off, right? Because we're feeling hurt. Okay, so if we're important to believe they should apologize first, is that true of me? If yes or maybe, then why do I need to be understood? Sounds like a dumb question, right? Don't we all want to be understood? But maybe in this situation, why is it so important for this person to understand me according to my definition of being understood? And sometimes we secretly feel like they should agree. Understanding equals agreeing, and that's not going to happen. All right, sorry, I'm editorializing a little bit. Why do I need to be validated? Okay, interesting, right? Is it possible this desire might subtly block openness on my part, requiring the other person to change first? Okay. Sometimes it's like, well, I'm not going to bend if you're not going to bend, or I'm not going to listen to you till you listen to me. See how these last couple slides are going? And we get very kind of like those people. They're kind of like this, right? So I'm being rigid and you're being rigid, right? And we're in an impasse. So what if sometimes I have to bend a little first, or I have to listen a little bit more first, right? And then that changes the other person, and then the situation gets better, right? Sometimes being stubborn and saying, well, you better change first, just keeps it stuck, right? So asking some of these questions, well, why do they need to apologize to me? Why do I need to be validated? You know, maybe that's holding me back in something, is it? Right? Okay. The next one that we do sometimes, we start making assumptions about the motives of the people who are giving us feedback. Okay. So we try to discount the feedback by assuming that their motives are negative, right? And therefore we could just dismiss what they have to say without really considering it and being open to it, right? So here we go. Do I believe that I know what the intentions are of the person giving me disconfirming feedback? For example, am I assuming that they're trying to promote themselves? Or do I believe that they're trying to manipulate, coerce, or intimidate me? If yes or maybe, then is it possible I'm not really giving them a chance? What if what they had to say was good, but you didn't like the motive behind it? Is it worth really throwing the whole thing away? What if they still had a kernel of truth in what they said? Okay, those are my spontaneous questions, by the way. All right, and what am I afraid of? Here's a fear again, right? What am I afraid of might happen if I were to momentarily drop my perspective? Maybe I just explode? I don't know. Maybe. Okay, right? All right, here we go. Another thing we could do sometimes is say, well, they're not listening to me, so I'm not listening to them, right? And sometimes we also mean, well, they're not agreeing with me, so I'm not going to agree with them. All right. So do I think it's unfair to fully listen to someone who I believe is not listening to me? All right, is that a belief we hold, perhaps? If yes or sometimes, then is it possible this is happening right now? And if yes or maybe, then why do I need things to be fair, right? Would it make more sense in this situation for me to listen, even if I don't feel listened to? Because maybe I could get something out of this interaction, or maybe me listening to the other person would loosen them up and then they would want to listen to me? Okay. Okay. So blame, right? So sometimes when we feel we're being attacked or we're being invalidated, it's very easy to throw it back on the other person and blame, right? But as they say, if you're pointing to the other person, there's always three fingers pointing back at you, right? So we still have to do self-inquiry to turn it back to ourselves, okay? So blaming is a sign of being closed to feedback about me because I'm putting all my attention on you, okay? So am I automatically blaming the other person or the environment for my emotional reactions? Okay, look what you did to me. Look how you made me upset. Okay, if yes or maybe, then is it possible this could represent a way for me to avoid being open to feedback? Okay, Not easy to be open if we're blaming, right? So we gotta see if we can loosen that up. Okay, here's the Mr. Know-It-All. Okay, so sometimes we don't want to take a new feedback because we just want to make it like we already know everything. Okay, so here we go. Do I believe that further self-examination is unnecessary because I've already worked out the problem, know the answer, or have done all the necessary self-work about the issue being discussed? Been there, done that, right? Okay, if yes or maybe, then is this possible that I'm not willing to truly examine my personal responses? Okay, do I really know everything, or is it possible maybe there's something you could tell me that I don't know, or maybe that I could learn, right? Why do I feel so convinced I know the answer? Why do I need to feel so convinced I know the answer? What am I afraid of? What do I fear I might lose, right? Okay. All right, here's another one. All right, so this is kind of like, if we get invalidated or we feel criticized or we feel like we need to change something, sometimes we just go, oh, forget it. Whatever, do what you want. I'll just go along with it. I don't want to argue with you. Forget it. I don't care, right? So we're kind of doing a giving up or giving in kind of thing. So we're not being willing to continue engaging with the person or the process to work something out. We're just prematurely giving up because we don't know if we don't really believe it can work out, or it's too painful to engage in the process, okay? So do I have a desire to give up, give in, or agree with the feedback? If yes or maybe, then it's possible my agreement is disguised avoidance, okay? Avoidance with the true engagement about the issue, right? Am I agreeing in order to avoid conflict and not because I truly believe they're right, right? So this is kind of like when we go along with stuff we don't really agree with, and that's maybe against our morals or against our values or against what we believe, just because we want to, avoid a big thing about it, right? But then it's kind of like we don't feel good about it because we didn't really believe in it, right? So what might this mean, right? So we got to look at that response. Okay, I'll call this one sound familiar, okay? So is this feedback I'm being given something that I've heard from others before? Okay, so if a bunch of people keep telling you the same thing, chances are they might have a point. They're not all, making it up. They're not all magically against you, okay? So if one person tells you you're arrogant, yeah, it's just their opinion. But if another one tells you that, and another one, and another one, and another one, they're not all crazy, right? They might have a point, okay? For example, I heard from Jan Van Zandt, right, who's like a spiritual teacher. He said, if one person tells you you're a horse, they're crazy. If two people tell you that you're a horse, they're stupid. If three people tell you you're a horse, you better look in the mirror because chances are you have hay hanging out of your mouth and a saddle on your back, right? Because the more people that tell you the same thing, the chances are that they have a point, right? So is this feedback I'm being given something I've heard from others before? And if so, what might this mean? Maybe it means they have a point. Is it possible that there's something to learn from this feedback, right? Important not to blow off everybody. Okay, so if you've gone through this process or you're struggling with this process of self-inquiry, right? That's something to look at too. So these are questions you could ask yourself if this process is hard for you or you're resisting it in some way, okay? So what might my resistance to be trying to tell me about myself or my willingness to engage in learning this skill? What am I resisting, right? What am I afraid of? Is there something important for me to acknowledge or recognize about myself or the current moment, right? Is there a painful insight that maybe I need to start to look at, even if it hurts a little bit, okay? Is it possible that I'm numbing out or shutting down in order to avoid taking responsibility to make important changes, right? Because sometimes if I really look at myself and I notice something's not right, I need to change something. And change is hard, right? So maybe that's part of what's going on here. Because self-inquiry is supposed to help open us up. And once the box is open here, now there's all kinds of things to examine. And it's possible I might need to change something. So that's an important reason why we might resist, right? So we got to ask ourselves, is this what's going on here? Okay. And so what is it that I need to learn? Okay. Always a key question. What do I need to learn from this situation? Okay, and I believe this is the last slide, okay? All right, so did that make sense? I hope so. But this is a great skill. You could use this almost any time. Just do it mentally. If you notice yourself feeling a little closed, just riff and ask yourself some of these questions, right? As you can see, I kind of like made some stuff up as I went along. So you don't have to ask the exact questions that are in the book. Ask questions that help you open up. It might be a totally unique question that gets you to your edge and helps you gain that insight. That'll help you be more open. Okay? All right, so try it. You have nothing to lose, right? Except maybe, the same old thing or your closed door. Okay, all right. Thanks for listening, everybody. See you in lesson 2. Okay, bye.